Hi, my name is Tony Brown. I'm professor of Russian at Brigham Young University. Pleased to be with you today to share some ideas about internships, specifically about how to be able to direct internships using a model that's sustainable. I've been doing this since 2007, sent the first group of students over to Moscow, and at the time there wasn't really a culture for internships at the university. And so the support was minimal, you might say. I had to come up with a way to be able to make this not only affordable for the students, but also manageable from the standpoint of administering the program, since my full-time profession is teaching. And so what I did is I went over to Moscow and met with a colleague. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, how I developed the program, and kind of walk you through how you can do this in the future also from your institutions. All right, so let's jump in here. First, why even offer internships in the first place? Well, I think as has become evident, internships increasingly are essential to a student being able to move beyond the university into the workplace. It used to be sort of a luxury, you might say, to do an internship before graduating. Now it's pretty much considered essential. Employers want to see that a student not only has classroom experience, but that they have real-world experience working in their preferred profession. And so that's what the idea of the internship is, to send them out, to give them that kind of real-world experience and make them marketable for post-graduation. How does our internship model look? Well, what I'm going to do is walk you through a few points here. Combining language and field-specific work, locating in-country directors, types of internships, prep course, OPI testing, that stands for oral proficiency interview testing, language course, courses offered in-country, a curriculum that students take associated with their internship, details associated with their internships, countries where we're in, and testimonials. And then lastly, how you can implement these types of structures in your own programs. Okay, so now I teach Russian here at BYU, and what I wanted to do is to be able to give students in the program an opportunity to be able to apply not only their interest in, say, medicine or law or whatnot, but I wanted them to be able to do that in the target language, specifically Russian. And so this is a way for students to be able to not only improve their language skills, but also get important professional experience. Now, I realized that there was no way that I was going to be able to do this on my own in terms of placing students in an array of different internships. What you'll find oftentimes is that internship programs at institutions revolve around maybe 2 or 3 different internships. What I wanted to do was to give students in our program, who typically have a second major, an opportunity to go abroad and do an internship in whatever that field was, and then superimpose on that experience their foreign language. So it wasn't a matter of saying, if you go to Russia, you have to do X or Y internship. Rather, what I wanted to do is to be able to give them an array of opportunities to choose from. In fact, we would go and find them an internship, and then they could do it in the target language. The only way I was going to be able to do that, though, is if I had specialists abroad that could handle finding internships in those areas. Doing it from here simply just was not possible. So fortunately, I did find someone in Moscow, and that person has since been my colleague with whom I've worked for the past 13 years in developing programs throughout Europe. The model works this way. I find an in-country director, and that in-country director then places students in internships based on their professional interests. Now, what types of internships are there? You name it. It's just a matter of being able to connect with people in those various areas. I've had students do everything from electrical engineering to economics to nursing, sociology, applied physics. The list goes on and on. Certainly is not limited in any way, shape, or form to a linguistics-based internship. Rather, the language becomes a means to accomplishing whatever it is that they're wanting to do professionally. So how to prepare students for this type of experience? In order for them to be able to hit the ground running, they really need to be able to develop some skills before arriving in country. And so the semester prior to their departure, students complete what's called, well, an internship prep course. And during that course, we walk them through several competencies that we want them to focus on while they're on their internships. Specifically, those competencies that we've outlined for the program are as follows: intercultural collaboration and teamwork, intercultural awareness / cross-cultural competence, intercultural professional communication, and lastly, domain-specific professional language. And I'll talk about those some more as we get into this. In that prep course, we also introduce them to a number of individuals who are specialists in areas of, say, for example, mental health. We want them to be not only physically healthy on their internships, but we want them to be cognitively, emotionally healthy, mentally healthy. We also run a international security and health and safety and education abroad meeting so that they can be aware of what the concerns are wherever they are in the world. So by the time that we're finished with that course, not only have they received important sort of institutional training from the standpoint of mental health and security, but they've also received important direction in the way of developing competencies so that when they hit the ground, they can hit the ground running. In addition, before going, they complete what's called an oral proficiency interview. Now, I've done this since the very get-go, and I feel like this is a very important part of the program. Why? It's one thing to be able to say anecdotally, yes, this experience improved my language proficiency. It's another thing, though, to be able to show objectively that indeed it did. The American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages has what's called an oral proficiency interview. And students prior to going on the internship complete this interview. And then just before returning back to the States, they complete a post-interview. Those two bookends give us a way of being able to see whether or not the experience abroad actually jiggled the dial, so to say, in terms of their proficiency. The data are overwhelmingly affirmative in this regard. They show that this experience contributes significantly to their gains, and especially when you get into the advanced threshold, you have to have that in-country immersion type experience coupled with, and we'll discuss this some more also, coupled with formal language classroom experience. If you have both the real world experience coupled with that formal language component and you are immersed in the language, you most definitely are going to see gains over the course of a 3-month program. What do these in-country language courses look like? Students complete a course that's really centered around the debate format. Several years back, working with colleagues here and in Moscow, I developed a course that is based on parliamentary style debate. And students now who go, at least on the Russian program, complete the coursework associated with that text. They work with native speakers of the language and routinely conduct debates in the language based on the language that they're learning as they go through the material. That course is 96 hours. And you can imagine after 96 hours of that sort of intense advanced level instruction, you're going to see some improvement. Now, some of the other programs have fewer hours. It just depends. For example, if I were to send a student to Berlin, that student would have 45 hours of language instruction. A lot of it just depends on how much credit the department wants to be able to give students that go on the programs. And so if we're offering 6 hours of credit, we're obviously going to require that the student takes a larger load of language study while in the country versus, say, 3 credits. Okay, and in addition to the language component, what students complete is what we call a Russian 399 or German 399R curriculum. This is a Canvas curriculum, so students can do it on their own time. Why do we have this? Well, we feel like it's really important that students have a way to be able to articulate their experience so that they can talk about what it is that they are doing, and when they return, they can articulate that experience to an employer, let's say, who says, okay, what did you do while you were on your internship? This particular curriculum is designed such that students, as I said, can do it on their own time, and it really centers around 4 competencies that I already mentioned. And to make these competencies relevant to employers in such a way that they're not just, an item on a student's transcript, which doesn't really mean much to an employer. What we've built into the curriculum is what are called badges. Another word for that is micro-credential, for example. And that is actually something that an employer understands. They can look at the micro-credential and they can see, oh, okay, this was the content associated with that particular badge. They can say, okay, and this institution endorsed it. These were the mentors. These were the people who passed it off. Oh, okay, I get it. This is really relevant now. How does one go about completing each of these badges? Well, in addition to the regular coursework associated with the curriculum, there's a culminating experience. So for example, let's look at intercultural competence. Students will write biweekly reflection pieces that describe their experiences. And specifically, these experiences involving cross-cultural, what you might say, differences or conflicts. And then by the end of the program, what we want them to do is to write about a particular experience that was transformational, you might say. Why? Well, we want to be able to see to what extent did this experience not only influence their perspective, but fundamentally change who they are as a person. Intercultural collaboration and teamwork. What do students do in terms of this competency? Well, we want them to interview a subject matter expert. And in most instances, this is their supervisor. So what could they ask? Well, they might want to ask what were some of the important skills and competencies that person needed in order to be successful in that field, to prepare to do well in that field. Or what kinds of problems and solutions that expert has had to face. Beyond that, the third competency is intercultural professional communication. We want them to give a presentation at the end of their internship to their supervisor and their coworkers, so demonstrating not only their language ability, but also what they've done on their internship in terms of the skills that they've developed. And lastly, when it comes to domain-specific professional language, this is where the oral proficiency interview comes in. This is an objective measure. When they complete this at the end, they can say, yes, I've demonstrated that I can speak whatever language it is at this level. And that proficiency level is respected the world over. So these are just a few ways of being able to actually measure the added value of their experience from a curricular standpoint. So what are the options? The options actually just continue to grow from semester to semester as more students find out about the programs. And with this type of structure, it's very malleable. So it's not like it has to be, one director taking on every country. Rather, there can be multiple directors, and those directors are responsible for students in their respective countries. So as it stands right now, we have students going to Russia, specifically Moscow, going to the Baltic states, Riga, Latvia in particular, Berlin, and then Warsaw, moving into Bratislava, into Ljubljana, Slovenia, into Prague, Czech Republic, and continuing to expand into the Balkans. So potential is enormous. And as I said before, largely owing to the cost here, many students are able to go, and if they're able to afford to go. So just want to talk about a couple of students, just as examples that have gone out recently. One of those is Aiden Houston. He went out on the program to Riga, Latvia, as did Emily Hoskins. Aiden did his internship with Vault News there, and had the opportunity actually to ask Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, a question during a press conference. He was right in the thick of that whole experience of being able to see journalism but actually do it at the same time. Had a marvelous experience at his internship. Emily Hoskins focused on cancer research and was able to work on some really interesting projects that reflected her interests in cancer research, work that she had already started on here at BYU, and now that she's actually continuing with as a graduate student at Ohio State University. Her internship experience there in Latvia really served as a springboard for being able to move right into a PhD program. Time and again, students have told me that after their internships, they've gone on and they've interviewed with either graduate schools or with future employers, and those people interviewing them have wanted to know what it was that they did on their internship. In spite of all the work that they did as students at the university, oftentimes the people interviewing them are especially interested with what kind of international experience they had. And I've heard from many a student that the experience that they had on their internships actually proved critical to their either landing a job or getting a position, a slot in a graduate program. These students that have been on the programs have gone on and done some remarkable things. We're beginning to see the first generation, you might say, of interns now even moving into the professional world beyond graduate school and making a difference in building their professionals through the skills that they've developed. This applies, of course, not only to the broader fields of business, medicine, and law, right, kind of the big ones that you see at a university, but into the fields of engineering, right, the STEM fields. This is becoming increasingly relevant to our students. Into the social sciences, into the humanities, in virtually every sphere. The skills that they develop on these internships translate, or rather you might say transfer, into any number of disciplines and make them extremely marketable in the process. So how this type of experience applies to other institutions? It's very replicable. As you've noticed, this type of experience is pertinent to students at many different levels. It used to be that the common wisdom was a student would go on an internship between his or her junior and senior year. Right, because that was sort of like a finishing experience to one's undergraduate education. The problem, though, with that is that what if, and this isn't just a what if, I would say more often this is maybe upwards of 20% of the time, a student goes on an internship and comes back and realizes that the field that he or she thought was the field they wanted to go into, in fact, isn't. So if you're going into your senior year and you have that realization, it's pretty difficult to start backpedaling and renegotiating your curriculum, or rather your studies. So students, and I think rightly so, are starting to go on internships actually much sooner, between their freshman and sophomore year, sophomore and junior year. And yes, there are those that go between their junior and senior year, and even those who defer graduation semester so that they can go after they've completed all of their coursework. I would say it's never too late, but the sooner that a student can go, oftentimes the better, so that they can really test drive what it is that they think that they want to do. I often tell students, you wouldn't go out and buy a car without having test driven it. So why would you just decide to throw yourself into a professional track without having test driven that? Best way to do that, as far as I'm concerned, is to do an internship. Again, this model, it's just a matter of finding in-country directors, working with those directors to place students in internships and coordinating efforts with them, which makes doing this type of administrative work from the standpoint of a faculty member at a university doable. Otherwise, if the faculty member is trying to do everything, it's just not sustainable. So working with these in-country directors, having a contractual relationship from semester to semester with them, makes this not only doable but affordable for the students also. And the added value of this is not only are they getting professional and linguistic experience, but they're also getting university credit for it. So that's very important for them. All right. I believe that is it. Thank you for listening to what I have to say on this.